Another tragic day in America. A shooting at a Roman Catholic church, the Church of the Annunciation in Minneapolis, has left 2 children dead, 8 and 10, 2 others seriously wounded, 17 wounded in total. The killer, who has been identified as Robin Westman in his early 20s, is dead, I believe, by a self-inflicted wound. Don't know much else for certain. I'm going to wait upon events to report it. But I want to begin the show today with Trey Gowdy, who you know, of course, from Congress and from Fox News. You will probably remember a very experienced prosecutor. He's the author of a brand new mystery novel, The Color of Death, which he co-authored with Christopher Grayson. And welcome, Trey. It's good to have you on, Congressman. As there is a Mae Jennings in your book, a forensic psychiatrist specializing in major depressive disorders, who teaches at the local university on abnormal psychology and is a death penalty case witness. Anything in your background give you any insight to people who do stuff like this?
Almost always white, disaffected males. One notable exception in Tennessee. Got a track. Oftentimes, they have no criminal history. So the first place you look is whether or not they're a prohibited person from carrying a firearm, because you want to know how you gained access to it. Everyone will be focused on the why. I can just tell you, having done this for 20 years, even if there were to be a why, you would be left unsatisfied. There is nothing that explains shooting into a church, targeting the softest target of all, Hugh, the place that welcomes the downtrodden, the sick, people that have been outcast. That's what churches do. So it's the softest of all targets and the most innocent of all victims. There is no why that is ever going to satisfy our rational minds that want to know why.
That is well said. And again, to the audience, I will give details as they develop through the afternoon. I'm not sure we will learn more about the killer, and I won't use the killer's name very often because I think it is alleged in one of the New York Post stories that he had an obsession with the Sandy Hook slaughter and other mass killers. Do you think there's a subculture of mass killers who are feeding on mass killings, Trey? And do you think people ought to cover this with that in mind?
Yes, and I am, first of all, not surprised and extremely grateful that someone as thoughtful and prescient as you reluctantly uses the name. Because what they want is notoriety. They want to be remembered in the aftermath of their horrific acts in a way that they were never noticed in real life. And I do not use their names. I will not give them what they covet. So
I wish that was.
Yes.
If you remember the Virginia Tech killer, he left videotapes, which he sent to the local NBC affiliate, and they ran them. And from that moment on, you don't give them what they want. You just don't do it. So, Trey, as we wait for events, I want to talk about your book, and it's The Color of Death. And I got to tell you a couple things about this. First of all, when my booker called me up, they said, Trey Gowdy's got a new book. Do you want to talk to him? I said, yes, absolutely. I was expecting something on politics. I was not expecting a murder mystery. 2, I'm not a murder mystery guy. I'm a thriller guy and nonfiction. Although when my dad was alive, I think I read every Ed McBain and related novel ever because he'd roll through one of those every 2 days. And so I picked up The Color of Death thinking, okay, let's see if you can hook me. And you did, to the point that I approached it the same way I do with a thriller. I am about a quarter of the way from the end. I never want to do a spoiler on a mystery murder or a thriller. So well done. Would you tell people basically why you wanted to do this? Because this is not in your lane.
No, sir. But it's been in my head, Hugh. Anytime the sermon may be dragging on or anytime the speech was less than inspiring, I was writing this book in my head for probably a decade. I just never had the guts to put pen to paper until my boss, literally Suzanne Scott at Fox, in her office said, we want you to try it. And so I put pen to paper. I love to write. It is my favorite thing to do. I wrote all my openings, all my closings, all my congressional speeches. Probably not unlike you. I don't rely on other people to do the writing. I needed a collaborator because the point of view is hard to get in fiction books. I envision God kind of narrating the story, but you have to have the dialogue and the points of view. I really you look at movies and miniseries, even television shows, they don't capture what prosecutors do. They just have us as lawyers that show up on the morning of jury selection, look at a file, and know the rules of evidence. And the truth is, Hugh, I was at a ton of crime scenes. I was there the night the crime took place because I'm the one that has to explain to the jury what was and, more importantly, what was not done. And so if I have to do the persuading, I want to be involved as early on as possible. This is a book that I wanted the reader to be in the front seat of the car with a homicide prosecutor / investigator. And I want you to know the impact that it has on you. You cannot unsee what you have seen, and it haunts you for the rest of your life.
Page 62, a quote I wrote down. The best homicide prosecutors try to feel like a victim and think like a killer. The dualism wrecks you. You aren't getting inside a killer's head so much as they are taking up residence in yours. Someone I love warned me to get out before it's too late, but it's already too late. I am going to use that. You wouldn't know this, Congressman, but every year that I teach con law, I am not a criminal lawyer. I have defended one criminal case in my life for a friend whose kid was up on a minor drug charge, and I showed up, had no idea what to do, and threw myself on the good graces of the DA who helped me get the kid into a diversion program. So I don't know anything about prosecuting, but I know a lot of prosecutors, and I always tell my law students, think a long time before you become a prosecutor. It will burn you out. It will tear you up. And I know a lot of them have become judges after 20 or so years in the California system, but the toll is high. And I think you're pretty candid about that here.
My mom and my wife sat me down on Mother's Day 2009, and they're the two most influential voices in my life. And they said, you have to go do something else. It literally had wrecked my faith. Hugh, just to be candid about it, it had wrecked my faith. And they're both women of tremendous faith. So it kind of broken their hearts that had happened. And so you mentioned you're always good. You call me congressman, you call me chairman. I never really ran for Congress. I was running away from the courtroom. I wanted an honorable way out of what I was doing because we had 3 children under the age of 11 murdered. Not drownings, not killings, that's horrific enough, but murdered in the course of 6 days. And you look to the heavens and you just say, God, if you can do all these things, why can't you keep those kids alive?
Wow. All right. To my audience, I'm bringing Trey back in the second hour and the third hour. Trey Gowdy from Fox News on Sunday night. And I'm going to talk to him at length in the third hour, but I want to make sure every hour's audience hears about The Color of Death, because Trey Gowdy is a great host and a great congressman and fine prosecutor, but he hadn't learned Luntz's law of book promotion yet, which is you got to say the name of the book at least 3 times, 7 times in every segment. The Color of Death, The Color of Death by Trey Gowdy. He'll be right back in hour 2. Do not miss it, part 2. I'm gonna talk to Trey Gowdy throughout the program today. I taped the interview with him about 45 minutes ago after news of the shooting. More details are coming out. I'm going to be very slow to spread details about it because I want them confirmed by 2 or 3 sources before we go forward. I do want to tell you about my sponsor, Webroot, webroot.com/Hewitt. For all my listeners out there, you've heard me talk about identity theft before. It's stressful, time-consuming, a huge challenge to fix. That's why we can't take online protection lightly anymore. Your go-to cybersecurity solution needs to be Webroot, and right now you can get half off, 50% off, either Webroot Total Protection or Webroot Essentials when you go to webroot.com/Hewitt. Did you know that every 2 seconds an identity is stolen in the United States? It takes an average of at least 100 hours to resolve identity theft on your own. With Webroot, you can protect your identity up to 5 devices, or even cover the whole family with up to 10 identities and 10 devices. You can get real-time antivirus protection against malware, ransomware, phishing scams. I hate those. They're everywhere. Plus a firewall, a network monitor, and web threat shield to block bad websites before you even click. So go to webroot.com/Hewitt. Live a better digital life with Webroot. Disturbing details about the killer in Minneapolis. He is a transgendered woman, according to most accounts. Neo-Nazi elements, anti-Jew hatred, anti-Christian hatred, anti-Trump hatred. It's every kind of psychosis you can imagine, and early reports of his family supporting his transition. And I just don't know what quite to believe yet, but you can go online and decide for yourself, because after, you remember in Tennessee, there was a trans person attacked a Christian school, and it took more than a year to get the details of that out. And of course, the trans community does not want their members to be identified with school killers, and going to be difficult to prevent people from asking, when does gender dysphoria cross into a deeper, a sort of psychosis that should alarm. And I don't know where they got the weapons. There's a rifle, a shotgun, and a pistol involved, and we won't know for a long time. And hopefully, though, it will not take as long as it did in Tennessee, and the authorities will not be as reluctant to report details of what will be, for the left at least, a politically inconvenient fact about the identity of the killer. And I'm joined now by Danny Pletka, who is the Senior Vice President for Foreign Affairs, National Security at American Enterprise Institute. Danny, any thoughts on the shooting before I turn to Gaza and Ukraine?
Oh, look, what can anybody say except this is such a tragedy for the kids, and maybe it's not right to say, Hugh, but also think about the family of this poor misbegotten person who would take a gun to a school. It's a tragedy for everybody.
Yeah, I just encourage people who have mental illness in their family to please keep weapons away from those who you are worried about. That's about the only thing I can add. Danny, I want to talk about the fact that as we speak at the White House, Ron Dermer, National Security Advisor to Prime Minister Netanyahu, is meeting on Gaza, reports that the president is urging Israel to move quickly in Gaza City so that the war can end. What do you make of this?
Look, I understand the way the president feels. I think, we know his attitude because we hear it on Ukraine as well. He wants the war to end. He wants the violence to end. The problem is that for a war to end, you need to have two parties that want it to end. And Hamas is profiting so enormously, Hugh, from what has been going on over the last few months. Hamas is so enjoying the rabid anti-Semitism, the anti-Israel activity, the recognition of a quote-unquote state of Palestine. They have zero incentive to give up the hostages, which is what it will take for the Israelis to step back.
Has any one of our European allies Macron started it, but then Starmer joined in, and then Merz joined in, and Carney joined in Canada, have any of them realized the error of their ways?
Oh, no, you're joking. Look, these countries are, first of all, not the countries that they once were. I include my own native Australia in this, where, Prime Minister Albanese has also announced he's going to recognize a Palestinian state. And, this is no service to the Palestinians. It is no service to peace or a peace process. And absolutely, they're never going to recognize it. One big reason why, because their populations now look increasingly like Holland's and like London's, which is hundreds of thousands, millions and millions of Muslims who have not been integrated and who are drifting towards extremism, being encouraged by left-wing European parties.
So what do the political actors in a Europe that is becoming increasingly, significantly Muslim, what do they do about their politics if because Great Britain absorbed Muslims for 300 years, it was not even a thing, and they became assimilated into British life, but no longer. What do these countries do?
Look, this is a huge question that is rooted in something that has very little to do with religion and everything to do with how Europe has, since World War II, lost its sense of identity. After the war, countries thought that patriotism and nationalism equaled Nazism. And so they abnegated any sense of national identity. They stopped teaching history, they stopped teaching pride, and they stopped integrating foreign immigrants and their families into the rules of our society and the rules of Western civilization. And now they're reaping the whirlwind. I don't know how they reverse it.
Viktor Orban catches a lot of grief from Americans of all across the political spectrum because he can be exclusionary. Sometimes he's thought to be pro-Russian. I don't know what to make of him because I don't know anything about Hungary, but I know a lot of people who love Hungary. What do you make of him, Danny Pletka? Because he has refused to allow mass immigration to occur.
You know, I don't like Orban. I think he has dabbled in anti-Semitism, which has long been a plague in Hungary. I think you're right that he has played footsie and much more with Vladimir Putin. But on this question, he has certainly found a lot of resonance with others in Europe who recognize that while there are humanitarian imperatives in letting in refugees and people in need, that in fact you cannot simply allow 1 million Syrians, just as Germany did. You can't allow 1 million Syrians in and expect that there will not be societal changes. And that's what he's rejected. And I think that's what other countries are going to have to come to terms with.
More than 20 years ago, then Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld talked about New Europe. He was really talking about Poland, I think. Is there anyone besides Poland that we look to and say, well done?
Look, I think that Poland is obviously a country that we've really come to rely on in NATO, that we've come to rely on as an ally, and that has a lot of sensible policies in a whole variety of these areas. You know, I think that the Czech Republic, to a certain extent, as well. This is not my neck of the woods as much, Central Europe. But the reality is that once you've lived under a totalitarian regime like the Soviet Empire, you have a very strong sense that you do not want to be dictated to, whether it is by your own extremist population or it is by a foreign set of extremists. And I think that's what's going on in Central and Eastern Europe.
And do you have a sense of why Finland seems to hold it together and Sweden does not? Because they look a lot alike.
They do look a lot alike, but the Finns the Finns are uncomfortably close and across the water from what was once the Soviet Union. They have a whole set of their own problems, but in terms of Sweden, they have also had untrammeled immigration. They have also had the kind of extremism that we've seen. And another thing that we remember is that this is a country that was always hostile to the Jews. And
yes,
that's another problem.
Yes. Danny Pletka, always good to talk to you. Follow her at dpletka on X over at the American Enterprise Institute. FBI Director Kash Patel has posted that the FBI is investigating the shooting in Minneapolis as an act of domestic terrorism and as a hate crime targeting Catholics, confirming 2 fatalities, an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old, 14 children, 3 adults injured. He identifies the shooter as a male who has changed his name. Apparently a member of the trans community. I don't know that for sure. I do know that one of our sponsors is the American Legislative Exchange Council, otherwise known as ALEC, ALEC.org, ALEC.org. And if you go to ALEC.org/Hugh, you will get a free State of the State newsletters, the developments that happen all the time in every state that matter and ought to matter as policy lighthouses to the other 49. They also put out state side-by-side comparisons across a host of issues, most recently States That Work report. It ranks all 50 states by their commitment to worker freedom, economic mobility, the right to work protections they have, the occupational licensing reforms, the laws that defend Janus rights, which means you don't have to be obliged to join a public employee union, public sector transparency, and when it comes to bargaining with public sector unions. Lawmakers are clearing the path for upward mobility in many states. The top 5 when it comes to this set of rules and laws: number 1, Arizona; number 2, Utah; number 3, Georgia; number 4, Arkansas; number 5, Florida. That could be a top 10 football rating, except They don't have Ohio in there anywhere. Bottom 5, the worst, I'm surprised by this, is Alaska. They're the worst when it comes to mobility and labor. Number 49 is Massachusetts, no surprise. 48, Oregon, no surprise. 47, New York, no surprise. 46 is Connecticut. Find out about your state and every other of the states when it comes to these discrete policy areas by subscribing to the State of the State free weekly newsletter at ALEC, A-L-E-C, alec.org/U. And don't forget how to check out how your country ranks, how your state ranks in the country at large by consulting richstatespoorstates.com. When you go to richstatespoorstates.com, they will send you, you need not pay a dime, they will send you their book on Rich States, Poor States. Always a fun read. Second sponsor I want to tell you about, Consumer Cellular. Their phone number is 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. I was reading this morning in the Wall Street Journal about the hack of the big cell company that began with AT&T. It's now spread to everyone else by the China, apparently government actors. They didn't get Consumer Cellular. As far as I know, I haven't seen them mentioned anywhere. Another good reason to maybe think about switching. The best reason is to get savings without sacrifice. If you will, call Consumer Cellular, 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. Use my code, HUGH25, because that will get you $5 off, a $5 credit on each of your first 5 monthly invoices. And don't forget, if you are 50 years or older, you can get 2 unlimited lines for $60. That's $30 each line unlimited. You can better manage your cost of living, your essential expenses, by using Consumer Cellular. And you get the $25 off when you use the promo code HUGH25. Get those savings without sacrifice, but don't forget my promo code HUGH by when you call 1-800-411-4454. Now let's go over and listen to Amy Klobuchar, Senator from Minnesota, cut number 10.
It, of course, makes me think about guns and all the work we've done to ban these automatic rifles and to do something when it comes to the background checks and everything, and we keep getting thwarted. We were able to pass a limited measure on a bipartisan basis, but not enough to stop something like this. And it just makes you think about that as well without knowing the details about how we got that gun, if the gun was legal, what kind of gun it was. But it was clearly one of these automatic rifles to be able to shoot that many kids so fast.
It apparently was not one of the automatics. A semi-automatic rifle, a shotgun, and a pistol. And so the senator, I know it's an emotional day, but it's better to say nothing rather than to be wrong. And thus far, as we've been able to ascertain, it's a semi-automatic long gun, a shotgun, and a pistol. Not sure there's anyone out there calling for the banning of those 3 kinds of weapons. I think she is afraid to talk about the underlying psychoses, which seems to link most mass shooters together. Not sexual psychosis, just schizophrenia, maybe? I don't know what it is. I'm not a doctor, and I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn. But from the time that Gabby Giffords was shot in the head and a federal judge murdered in Arizona right through today, it seems every time, as Trey Gowdy said at the start of the show, it's a disassociative white young person.
It, of course, makes me think about guns and all the work we've done to ban these automatic rifles and to do something when it comes to the background checks and everything, and we keep getting thwarted. We were able to pass a limited measure on a bipartisan basis, but not enough to stop something like this. And it just makes you think about that as well without knowing the details about how we got that gun, if the gun was legal, what kind of gun it was. But it was clearly one of these automatic rifles to be able to shoot that many kids so fast.
Welcome back, America. That's Senator Amy Klobuchar. It clearly wasn't one of those. It was a shotgun, a pistol, and a semi-automatic weapon. I am joined by Mary Catherine Ham. Mary Catherine Ham, your first reaction to the attack on the Annunciation Catholic Church. It wasn't an attack on the school. It was on the church where the school that is adjacent was having their back-to-school mass?
Yeah, my first reaction, which I wish could be everyone's first reaction, is just utter devastation for the families involved and for the school community and for the church community. It makes me nervous about Christian observances in my own community. I have already been very nervous for synagogues in my own community. I think these places need to be hardened as targets as much as possible to do the best we can. I think that the pivot toward political specifics so quickly is gross. I think even grosser is the sort of mocking or condemnation of prayer on behalf of this community that is a religious community. And there are so many Americans who think that rightly that prayer is not just commendable and fine in this instance, but necessary to support those who are hurting right now. And the weird go-to response from Democrats that is sort of like it's a criticism for lack of government action, but it's wrapped up in this very rude condescension about religious communities. We should pray. I find it so bizarre that that's their go-to to say that prayer bad.
And I thought Pope Leo sending a message to the Annunciation community was gracious and much needed. I'm sure there are serious Catholics up there. I know serious Catholics in Minneapolis, and they will be grieved. But let me ask you about, I just began a list, Virginia Tech, the Nashville School, the Arizona shooting that got Gabby Giffords and the judge, Sandy Hook, Columbine, Parkland. Trey Gowdy started the show because he has a new book out, The Color of Death. And he said it's always a young male, usually white, usually isolated with mental illness. I think that fits those six. It's not like it's a surprise when it's one of those six.
No, I think this seems to match a general type. It concerns me about rampant mental illness. I mean, you see self-reporting of mental illness going up precipitously over the last 5 years. I think a lot of that is general social isolation increased by pandemic regulations, plus availability of AI friends and online communities, which sometimes can be healthy, but sometimes can be really, really unhealthy. And the mental illness part of it is very delicate, very hard to tackle, very hard sometimes to recognize as psychosis, particularly if it's someone you love and you're trying to get them, particularly an adult, into treatment or medication. They have a choice not to do that. It can be very, very hard to get a handle on.
Do you think, I do not know if Minnesota has a red flag law, but given the images that we've seen, and I believe them to be true, but I'm open to being corrected, of the messages of hate written on the gun stocks and things like that, I don't know if it's AI generated. I suspect they are true. Ought we not to be able to tell? Do you expect parents to know that about a 20 or a 22-year-old who's living at home?
Yeah, I mean, if your child is living at home, I do think, these are some warning signs you ought to be able to see. Again, the action you can take is somewhat limited. I mean, I've known adult friends who refused to be medicated when they needed to, and that can be really, really dicey for family and friends. But to, a lot of these cases, you end up having families who had firearms within, that were reachable by people who were in. Yeah,
that was Sandy Hook.
That combo is horrendous. I also think there's some, and again, we don't know all the details on this, but I do think we need to be serious about the fact that someone with mental illness who is perhaps medicated with cross-sex hormones, if they are identifying as trans, could be very exacerbating to a lot of the potential for violence. And I think that's something we probably need to wrestle with as a society, because we have spent a lot of time pretending like these things don't matter, but they do.
Have we learned anything about the attempted assassin of Trump who was shot by Secret Service or local police enforcement after he had killed Corey and shot the president?
No, we still know very little about him or his online presence such that it existed at all.
Now, I expect that to change under this FBI. Do you?
I hope it does. I'm actually kind of surprised it hasn't yet. And now they say that he didn't have very much online presence. This guy seems to have had something that was very readily available and meant to be available. The other question is, do you publicize the feelings and thoughts and manifestos of these people lest you produce copycat results? I know that many on left especially feel like we should publicize them to protect against smears against the entire side of our aisle for perpetrating such things. And I understand that impulse, but I also do not want to create an incentive for people to do this by making them famous.
I was talking with Trey Gowdy earlier. I don't use their names after an initial identification. And so one and done. And they will never pass my lips again. But I don't know that that matters for anyone who's addicted to the internet and goes diving deep into Wikipedia. It really doesn't stop anything, does it?
No, the information will be out there to some extent, but it does worry me about what kind of platform we give these people, even in death, when that's kind of what they wanted. I mean, if his manifesto were to be believed, it is, I want to make a mark. And if you make him famous, you've done that.
I got to ask Mark Zuckerberg in person once at a small dinner whether or not they could minority report people. In other words, and he said, no, we can't do that. I think we can do that. Do you think we can do that? And if we can, do you want to do it?
Yeah, I'm iffy on this one, too. I think Zuckerberg, surely at Facebook, well, they can profile and have profiled for all sorts of innocent political leanings. Certainly you could profile for dangerous psychosis. Would that not be?
Yeah, I think we can do it.
I think as a private company, for sure.
Yeah, I just don't know whether or not we want the police acting on Minority Report. I still haven't seen the movie. Mary Catherine Ham, thank you. Follow her on X at MK Hammer. Coming up next hour, more of my interview with Trey Gowdy about his new book, The Color of Death. I'll be talking with former Congressman John Campbell as well about the president's firing of a Federal Reserve Board member. Selena Zito will be along. Let me check the market going into the close, brought to you by AmericanFederal.com. If you're buying gold, and many of you are, or if you're selling gold, and a few of you are, do it with AmericanFederal.com, 1-800-221-7694. Why? Because they are transparent, trusted, and experienced. 44 years in the business. I buy my gold from Nick Rovich and his team at AmericanFederal.com. You can check out their website, or you can call them at 1-800-221-7694. The market today is all green. The Dow is up 0.43 points. The S&P 500 is up 0.31 point, and the NASDAQ is up 0.25%. Gold is up $15.60 an ounce to $3,448.60. That is up a lot, like $700 from 3 weeks ago, and I don't know why, and I'm not a prophet nor the son of a prophet. I don't know what it's going to do in the future. All I can tell you is that gold has kept pace with inflation for more than 100 years, which is why financial advisors who stress diversification also stress gold is part of a diversified portfolio because it keeps pace with inflation. It holds its value, $3,448 an ounce. Now, American Federal will sell you a lot or a little of gold and or silver or platinum, but mostly gold. They will sell you an ounce, an American Eagle, a Canadian Maple Leaf, a Krugerrand. They'll sell you a quarter ounce or a half ounce if you want to get started, or they'll sell you a bunch of gold bars. They've done seven-figure deals as well. The more you buy, the lower the commission, because they have to make money to be able to stay in business, and they're very transparent about what they're charging you on every ounce of gold that you buy and every ounce of gold that you sell. All you have to do is talk to Nick. But the best thing about experienced, calm, cool, collected, transparent business owners like Nick and his team at AmericanFederal.com, you can hear the competence, you can feel the confidence, you know that they do this a lot, and you don't have to worry about getting taken to the cleaners, and they're not upselling you. They're serving you with what you want to buy or what you want to sell. Honest as the day is long. Nick Rovich and his team at AmericanFederal.com. Also, we'll be watching the market after the close in about 2 minutes because the Nvidia Corporation will be reporting earnings. There's an earnings call at 5 o'clock tonight. Nvidia makes markets. It leads the big tech companies up or down, and it's trading at a dime down because no one really knows whether Nvidia is going to meet its mark or miss its mark. But we'll know, and I'll let you know as soon as we know what it says about the future of AI and tech coming up pretty soon on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Don't go anywhere. John Campbell, as I said, coming along. Updates from Minneapolis as we learn them. about the victims and their families, about the killer and his psychoses, and much more right ahead. If you were listening to Hour 1, you heard the beginning of my conversation with Trey Gowdy, former congressman, former chairman, former prosecutor in the state of South Carolina. He is now the host of the Trey Gowdy Sunday Night in America show and the Trey Gowdy podcast, both Fox News production. And he co-authored this with Christopher Grayson. And The Color of Death is really not my style, but it got me. So the only other person who works in the genre who shows up occasionally on the program once a year is CJ Box. I have on Danny Silva and Brad Thor all the time because I like thrillers, not much of a murder mystery guy because usually they're not persuasive. This is very persuasive. This sounds like someone who had prosecuted a lot of murder cases. And Trey Gowdy, how many have you prosecuted? Dozens?
Oh, more than that. I've had I've had over 100 trials go to jury verdict, and well over half of those would have been homicides, including 7 death penalties. Did
you succeed in getting the death penalty?
Yes, sir. 7 for 7, which, as you know, means you have to get it twice. You have to convince them in the guilt phase and then convince them again in the sentencing phase. 12-zip in both of them, or you lose.
Now, did you go right into a prosecutor's office out of law school?
Gosh, I wanted to, but the Republicans would not interview me at the U.S. Attorney's Office. I was coming out of a clerkship with a federal judge, which those are hard to come by. So I thought I was positioned well. The judge begged the then U.S. attorney to interview me, but he would not. And then a guy named Bill Clinton won and picked Pete Strom to be his U.S. attorney. And my U.S. attorney certificate is signed by Janet Reno because the Republicans would not hire me.
So you're an AUSA. That was your first gig as a prosecutor.
I did it backwards. I was a federal prosecutor first, and then I left to run for district attorney. Most people do it state, and then they want to graduate up to federal because it's perceived to be more prestigious. But the truth is, state prosecutors see everything. And if you want to prosecute homicides or sexual assault, you really need to be in state court because it's rare to see that. I did do a federal murder case. It's rare to do them. I did one. I had a witness that was executed, but that's rare. The 99% of my murder cases were done in state court.
Yeah, I actually haven't heard of I don't know an AUSA who has prosecuted a death case. And my first day of class, I go around, I ask everyone, what are they doing here? What do they want to be? And whenever I find someone who is either interned as a prosecutor, because I teach 2Ls and 3Ls, and they want to go to be a DA, I stop and say, I'm going to talk you out of that this semester. You do not want to do that. I had the son of a DA in the law class this past spring, and he laughed because his dad's been doing it for 30 years. And, of course, everything that you have in this book, I have heard from my prosecutor friends, from the death threats and the stalking to the psychic damage to the horrors of doing it. But I want to get into the particulars of how you investigate. And I want to go quote, first of all, is there an Oakwood Cemetery, the most haunted place in South Carolina, or did you make that up?
I made up the name of the cemetery, but I was a paper boy, and I was afraid every morning to go deliver the newspaper inside the cemetery, and that's where that came from. Okay. I was on a moped, and I don't know what it was about. I guess when you're 13 and you are in the dark, going to deliver a newspaper past a bunch of graves, it had an impact on me. So I changed the name, but that part of it's real.
That's funny. Real. Now you are setting up, and it looks like to be an Ed McBain sort of series, because I don't even know if Colton Truesdale is going to make it to the end of the book, but because I haven't finished the book yet, I've got 25 pages to go. But Sheriff Lloyd Fuller, and I'm not giving any spoilers away, Detective Travis Hendrick, Frank Hastings of Hastings and Harris Law Firm, Judge Martin Weber, Rachel Simone, any of these people composites or individuals? How did you come up with them?
Belle is my wife.
The sweetest girl in the book.
Yes. Belle, because my wife, when you are surrounded by darkness, you have to have a little bit of light. I think it was Russ Cole in the end of True Detective that said, I had it all wrong. The light does win. It doesn't look that way, but it does win. And so my wife said, please, if you're going to write, a psychological murder mystery. Will you have some light in there? And I said, yes, and I'm going to model her after you. My boss in this book, not my boss, Calm Truesdale's boss, is Cindy. She was a coworker of mine. So I did model it after people in real life. The crime itself, the spine of the crime, a murder in a beauty salon, really happened. But every other part of it, the killer, the investigation, the suspects, I changed all of that. But I did have a murder in a beauty salon that went unsolved for a decade, Hugh.
Because the magic window is 48 hours, and you pound that home. 48 hours, 48 hours, 48 hours. So what happened after a decade?
We found semen on her stomach, but it's of no use if you don't have something to match it to. Her daughter grew up from a child to a beautiful young woman, went in to have her car repaired, and one of the men working in the car repair place said, I wonder if they ever found who killed her mother. And then he started thinking, I was hanging out with a guy that night who said he was going to get his hair cut, but I'm sure the police already know that, but he left an anonymous tip that I was hanging out with a guy named Jonathan Vick that night. He said he was going to get his hair cut. They were 17 years old at the time. So we went and did a trash pull to get the DNA, because once you abandon your trash, it's abandoned property. You can't go in the house and get it without a search warrant, but when you put it out for the trash, and we got a hit on the DNA. So after a decade, I can take you to the very spot where I was sitting and then standing when the sheriff called me and said, I think we know who killed Dana Satterfield.
What was there a brutality to that murder as there is in the murder in The Color of Death?
Awful. It was awful, Hugh. He disrobed her and hung her from the strap of her pocketbook from the top of a water heater.
So Mae Jennings,
level of anger.
Mae Jennings would describe that person as having whatever that disorder was, where the victim is brutalized after death because of the psychotic impulses of the killer.
Yes, and the nature of the weaponry. So in The Color of Death, the nature of the weapon gives you an insight. Guns are a very impersonal way of killing someone. Strangulation would be the second most personal, but a knife or a bladed object is the most personal, because the lifeblood of the person you are killing is literally coming up on you. It is the most personal way to kill someone, and therefore usually the most influenced by rage.
And that is why I do recommend people read The Color of Death if they want to be inside of a murder investigation, because you do pick up a lot, because Congressman Gowdy has actually done this. We'll be back in hour 3 with the congressman to continue the conversation about The Color of Death. I also want to tell people I'm keeping a pace of what is going on in Minneapolis. There's nothing new to report, and I doubt we will ever be inside of the psychosis that motivates a 22-year-old man who identifies as a woman shooting up a Catholic church full of back-to-school mass-attending kids. That was me. We always did that at St. Pius X, at St. Mary's and Blessed Sacrament and John F. Kennedy High School. I was a Catholic kid from the beginning of school to the end of high school. And there's always a back-to-school mass. There always is. Normally it's marked by, when I was a kid, nuns with clickers, not nuts with guns. And the change over the course of the decades is not for the better, and the culture is the cause, the propellant of that, the accelerant of that. And it's not something I take lightly. I've got 7 grandchildren. They go to school every day, or at least most of them go to school every day. And it's a horrific thing, but everything I've always recommended, which is more security at school, would not have worked today, because they had left their school and they had gone into a church adjacent, as most Catholic schools are. I'm not sure of the layout, but Blessed Sacrament, to take for example, in Warren, Ohio, the school is attached to the church. So you walked in from inside the school, so it would work there. I have to get a look at the layout. I don't know. I'll bring you more. Coming up after the break, I want to talk with former Congressman John Campbell about what President Trump has done in removing a member of the Federal Reserve for mortgage fraud, and whether or not he thinks that's for cause and whether or not he thinks that's going to stand up. Also waiting to see whether or not Nvidia earnings are anything like they have been in the past. It's trading up about 0.4% in after hours, so that's not based on anything. That's just speculators doing their thing because there isn't any data yet. But I'll tell you that when it comes in. Congressman John Campbell formerly represented the state of California in the United States House of Representatives for a decade. He did the same in the California State Senate and the California State Legislature, so we blame everything in California on John. But nevertheless, he comes here he's working it off like penance for his legislating. And he also chaired the subcommittee of the House Financial Services Committee having to do with the Federal Reserve. So he's no dummy when it comes to the Federal Reserve. John Campbell, welcome. It's always good to talk to you. Even on a grim day like today, I want to talk about the Federal Reserve and President Trump's firing of Lisa Cook. I want the people to know the background. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled in Trump v. Wilcox that the President of the United States can remove members of the National Labor Relations Board and the Merit Systems Protection Board, regardless of the requirement for cause. But they went out of their way in their opinion to say this doesn't apply to the Federal Reserve. So what do you think? You think this is going to stand?
Well, I think, the question is, can he remove someone for cause? And I think most people believe the answer to that is yes, that he can. So the question here is an allegation of mortgage fraud that has not yet been adjudicated on the basis of this one member of the Federal Reserve, does that qualify as a cause, as a sufficient cause to remove a member of the Federal Reserve? Obviously, Lisa Cook believes no. Trump believes yes. And so that's where it is at the moment. As far as whether the legal aspects of it, you're much more qualified to opine on that than I.
I like to be very humble on cases of first impression. I don't know. Nobody does. It's a case of first impression. I wrote a column tomorrow about the Posse Comitatus Act, since everyone's throwing it around, and nobody knows that it's never been actually adjudicated in any kind of systematic way. So whether or not Donald Trump can do what he wants to do with the National Guard in D.C. and elsewhere will depend upon whether or not the Posse Comitatus Act in any way affects his commander-in-chief authority. But on this, given that they were already backing away from the for cause, I think she's going to end up out of a job. And if she has a remedy, the court will say, sue for your back pay. That's what I think they'll say. Well, will it be bad for the world if that happens?
No, it's actually very good for the world. And, I see all these things. I mean, Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal, all these people apoplectic that somehow this is changing the independence of the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve won't be independent anymore, and this is awful, and this is terrible, and blah, blah, blah. First of all, let's take a step back. Lisa Cook was appointed by Joe Biden to go on the Federal Reserve. She is a DEI appointment. Let's make no bones about that. If you look at her background, yes, she does have a PhD in economics from Berkeley. Now, these days, I might question whether that's genuine economics or not at Berkeley, but she has a PhD in economics from Berkeley. Her when she taught at Michigan, all of her career has been in government or in academia, and it has always been involved with international, primarily Africa, with a lot of focus on economics and the economics of Africa. And so her background, albeit has some economics, there's no private sector experience. Furthermore, she has all of her education and post-education involvement has been international. Well, the Federal Reserve doesn't do international. That's the IMF and other things. The Federal Reserve does domestic monetary policy. So she really has zero background for that. She's a DEI appointment. And the thing about DEI appointments, and I saw this in Congress and other places I've been, if you got your job because of color of your skin or your gender identity or whatever it is, some DEI reason, you believe you have Teflon on you, you believe you're bulletproof, they can't fire you. And to some degree, that's true. I mean, in a lot of states, you can fire a white male heterosexual under 50 years old with impunity. You can fire them because they're a white male heterosexual under 50 years old. But you fire a black female lesbian or something like that, you have to have a gigantic case to do that, or you'll get a wrongful termination suit. So these people act differently. I remember talking to a black member of Congress when I was there once. There was something he and I agreed we should do, but it was the press wasn't going to like it. And I said, look, if you do it, they won't bother you. If I do it, I'll be excoriated. He looked at me and he said, you're right, I'll do it. And so they understand this. And so I think what you see with her with the mortgage fraud, where she reported 2 different properties as her primary residence, is because she's a DEI, I think she figures she's immune to this. Well, guess what? She shouldn't be. She may think she is. The Biden administration may believe she is, but according to the law, she's not. And
what I did not realize, Congressman Campbell, is that the term is 14 years. Now, the Federal Reserve chair is 4 years, but the term of each governor is 14 years. Why?
Yes, I don't know why, honestly, but the one thing is not all the people who make the decision on interest rates that will make the next decision on September 20th are the Open Market Committee, which is a subset of the Federal Reserve larger board. You are not on the Open Market Committee for 14 years. So people rotate on and off the Open Market Committee. So it's not like she would be on there making the interest rate decision for 14 years. She'd be doing that for a shorter time than that. But yes, I know it would be. It's an amazingly long time, and so I think she should be removed. I think she never should have been appointed. I think it's total DEI appointment, not on the basis of qualifications or anything else. She is a political animal. The vast majority of her time, she worked in the Obama administration, and then was appointed by Biden. So she is not a true kind of economist, financial person that is making decisions on the. If you read anything that she's written, she has a lot of her economic decisions are politically charged. In other words, what can we do using the Federal Reserve to help climate change or to help DEI and promote more DEI and stuff like that. So I think she never should have been appointed. But when she was going to be there unless she did something wrong, and it looks like she did something wrong.
Now I want to get your quick reaction to Nvidia earnings. They have come in beating top and bottom line, but Data Revenue Center came in just shy of analyst expectations. They had projected Q3 revenue of $54 billion, plus or minus 2%. It came in at $53.4 billion. What's that tell you, if anything, John Campbell?
Well, the stock's down 2% in after hours, which is not very much. To understand, for those of listeners who don't understand why we're talking about this one company.
Well, I'll tell you, stick around because I don't want to get started. Can you stay for another segment?
Sure.
All right, stay. We'll bring him back after the break because I don't understand why the market cares that much about Nvidia, but John Campbell does, or at least he's about to pretend to, and that's good enough for me. Don't go anywhere, America. And you might even call 1-800-520-1234 if you have any comment on whether or not Federal Reserve board members ought to be removable. And any details on the Minneapolis shooting that come up, I will, of course, bring to you as they are revealed. Nvidia reported results after the bell of $1.05 per share on revenue of $46.7 billion. Analysts anticipated earnings per share of $1.01. There was a beat on revenue of $46.2 billion, so they beat the revenue forecast. So I really don't know why it is down about 2% in after hours. But John Campbell is here, and he knows a lot more about this stuff than I do. John Campbell, what do you think?
Okay, well, first of all, as we said before the break, or as we teased before the break, why do we care about Nvidia? It currently represents 8% of the value of the entire S&P 500, the Standard & Poor's 500 index. So the other 499 stocks represent 92%, but this one represents 8%. There hasn't been a company that had that was that great a percentage of the value of the overall stock market since the 1960s. I think probably either AT&T before they broke it up, or General Motors.
Yeah, I was going to say GM, maybe.
Yeah, before they almost broke it up in the 1960s, when it broke itself up, or stopped making money, basically. But not since the 1960s has something like this occurred. And obviously today the economy is much bigger, it's much wider. There are less companies that, in theory, should dominate, et cetera, et cetera. So therefore, it is very important. If, just to put it this way, if Nvidia stock were to drop in half today, the S&P 500 would go down by 4%. Just on that. If everybody
that would be like Black Tuesday when I was in the Reagan administration. That was an ugly day.
Yeah, if everybody else was the same, I mean, to put that in a Dow context, that would be what? The Dow would be down like, thousands of points.
Yep.
If that happens. So that's why we watch it, is that it's extremely valuable. Why is it so valuable? Because they make the chips that are going into all the AI, artificial intelligence, around the country and around the world, and they appear to be ahead of everybody else in these chips, and they're getting a lot of money for them, and they're making enormous margins, and that's the reason. So why is it, if it's a beat, is the stock down right now 2.41% in after hours, and we'll really know what the market thinks tomorrow, because most people aren't dealing in after hours. There are a lot of people will chime in the morning. But recently, Nvidia has been beating their estimated earnings by a ton. I mean, they've been coming in way over every time. The fact that this time they didn't come in way over probably means the market's wondering, perhaps this company isn't going to grow 100% a quarter or whatever. I'm making that number up. I don't know what it is, but it's huge. That the growth that this company has had in the last couple of years.
The 3-year return is 1,018%.
Yeah, there you go. So if people think that the next 3 years is only going to be a 200% return, which is pretty damn good, it's still priced right now for what it's been doing, and that sort of thing will continue. And so if the markets believe, and now there will be a conference call they'll have after this with the executives of Nvidia, and oftentimes then that will affect the market price, because they will give their outlook for the next quarter and the rest of the year.
Yeah, it's sort of like listening to Jerome Powell in Montana or Wyoming, wherever they go, Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and he speaks like an oracle. I think it's the weirdest thing that, his phraseology can send the market spinning. Yeah,
that's unfortunately, that's the way it is nowadays. There's a lot of people like me that believe the market should be priced on fundamentals, silly things like making money, and cash flow,
Profits.
Stuff like that. And profit should be priced on the basis of that. But an awful lot of the market pricing today is based on narratives, and based on which, of course, we see in politics as well, narratives of what's the narrative about what's going to happen next, what's going to grow, what's going to be big, what's going to not be big, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of that gets priced in now, as.
So what do you fundamentally think about the economy right now?
I read so much on this, and it seems to me that it's fine. I mean, there are a lot of doomsayers out there, and there are people who color their economic opinion by their politics. Oh, Trump's in office, therefore everything must be good. Oh, Trump's in office, therefore everything must be bad. I don't do that, because my living standard is based on my getting a return on my investment and not on politics. So I need to make an objective look at things.
To be dispassionate. And
correct.
Well, you're very dispassionate today, Mr. Campbell, even though you're responsible for the train to nowhere. You didn't stop it. You could have stopped it by throwing yourself in front of it, I think, but we'll talk about that next week. Follow him on X at JBT Campbell. JBT Campbell. Selena Zito is a columnist for the Washington Post, the Washington Examiner, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and the author of Butler, the best-selling New York Times bestseller about President Trump on that day in Butler when Selena Zito stood 4 feet from him. The president called Selena a half dozen times on the day after the assassination attempt, so she is no stranger to violence, but it still shook her up today. I've been reading your X page, Selena, and I think Catholics like you and me, who are used to going to Mass their first week of school cannot imagine this. And you've got some details that I did not know. Let me read what you wrote. The suspect's social media account contained videos showing long diary entries, weapons, bullets, and what appears to be explosive devices scrawled with violent language. Some of the diary entries contain elementary Russian and descriptions of killing children. In one video, the shooter shows a rendering of the Annunciation Sanctuary drawn from memory. According to court records, Robin Westman's mother, that's the second time I've said his name, soon to be banished forever, Mary Grace Westman, submitted a petition to change her child's name in November 2019. The judge granted the petition in January 2020 and wrote in an order making the name change official. Minor child identifies as a female and wants the name to reflect that identification. So, Selena, your reactions to this?
Well, first of all, it's very, very sad, right? You and I both grew up Catholic. We can see ourselves, we can see our children, we can see our grandchildren doing the same rituals and routines that we did. That was part of our faith and part of our education, and that was going to church. That is a place where you are most filled with aspiration, joy, and hope. And that this person made the decision that this is when they were going to attack is a level of deep darkness and hostility towards the place, right? But also towards the religion, and obviously, I don't know if this person went to the school, but obviously I can't remember. Is it a man or a woman?
It's a boy who identifies as a girl.
Okay. If they attended this school, but there certainly was a hostility towards this place that was deep and dark, and they lived out their dark fantasies and killing innocent children at that place.
I have not been in a Catholic curriculum for a long time, but if they're at all traditional, they will teach that human sexual intimacy is reserved for a man and a woman in marriage. And that if you have an attraction for the same sex, they will teach the Catholic Church just counseling and more prayer and staying close to God, but not the interaction, physical interaction. And they will not approve of transgender transition. They will say, work it out with your psychologist. But would that cause someone, that's not a source of rage, it's unless you're a psychotic.
Well, see, here's our problem. Everyone, as predicted, as soon as there's a tragedy, they go after guns, right? Or they make it political. And they always skip over the most evidential thing about what is wrong in our society, and that is mental illness. It is not
I make the Virginia Tech, the Nashville Christian School, the Arizona shooting that got Gabby Gafford, Sandy Hook, Columbine, Parkland. I'm probably missing a few that are obvious now. I will add, sadly, Annunciation to this list of woe. But they're all done by psychotic people who've had mental breaks.
Yes. Yes. And clearly, none of them had these psychoses under I don't know if it's under, I don't know if the right phraseology is under control or managed or medicated or addressed or put under the covers, and hopefully nobody knows that it's happening, right?
But I know I want to assume that we have some people who are transsexual listening right now, and I want to say this: not remotely is it a significant percentage of people who are identifying as transsexual psychotic. Right. Not remotely. And the temptation to say that is as deep as the temptation to blame guns. And in fact, we're talking about a subset of psychoses, but what I've never seen anyone try and figure out what links them.
Right.
Have you?
Right. No, absolutely not. It's like it's taboo. We can't address that. We can't talk about that.
And why can't we? Is it because we don't know, or because it makes us uncomfortable and puts us in the harm's way of the woke, who are in retreat? I mean, they changed Cracker Barrel back yesterday.
I think it's more the latter, although somewhat of the former.
Okay,
right.
Here's the hard question. I mentioned this earlier to somebody. I got the opportunity once to have dinner with Mark Zuckerberg, and I asked him, do you have the ability to identify school shooters using metadata?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, no, we can't do that. You mean like Minority Report? And I said, okay, I just want to know. Now, I think they do. Don't you think they do?
Well, look, there's science behind algorithms and detection and, sort of all that granular ability to get inside the head of who their users are, right? Because their users are where their money is. I suspect they are much closer than he admits.
And that was 5 years ago. I now, the algorithm now knows I want to see Don Rickles talking to Johnny Carson. I swear, I get the baby's video, where the baby plays Trump and the baby plays. Yeah. I get those, and I get Don Rickles and Johnny Carson. And I think I watch one of each, and that's the end of time for the algorithm. What do we have to do about this if they were living at home? If they're living at home, are the parents responsible in your view, Selena?
That's the unknown question, right? Like, what did the parent? It's the same with Thomas Crooks.
I was about to say, can you stay for another segment because I want to ask you about Thomas Crooks.
By the way, Butler is back on the New York Times bestseller list today.
I'm not surprised, and this is going to add to it because Thomas Crooks is, of course, the would-be assassin of President Trump who did kill Corey Compatore, and Selena was right there when the president was shot and when Corey Compatore was murdered by Mr. Crooks, and we don't know anything about him. Nothing. It's like the Las Vegas shooter from years ago who killed 50 people from the high-rise hotel. For some reason, we don't know anything about many of them, and then we know a lot about some, and we're learning more by the minute about this killer. Stay tuned. We'll find out about what we know about Crooks next. I'm in the Relief Factor studio. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I'm back with Selena Zito in the Relief Factor studio. Selena, Thomas Crooks was the would-be assassin of President Trump, as you detail in your best-selling book, Butler, and he did kill Corey Compatore. What do we know about him a year after the shooting? Not
much. So what we do know, and this is detailed in the book, at some point in November of 2023, Crooks had a mental break, and this came from his father. And he went, and also detailed in his online habits. He went from having a school email address and to getting an encrypted email address. And he started posting and interacting on the dark web, right? Everything is encrypted. You can't see it. And then his father noted in his interviews with the FBI that he would started talking to himself and dancing alone in his room and talking and making wild gestations and everything sort of started to change with him, and he became much more withdrawn. That's the most we know about what happened with him mentally.
Now, when you talk to the president, do you ever ask him if he asks about Crooks?
Yes, and the answer is yes, but that's a really difficult thing for him to talk about. There are two very difficult things for him to discuss, and it's that young man and Corey Compatore.
Oh, I'm not surprised. I'm really not surprised. You etched that very well, but I was wondering if you'd talked to him recently about it, because you can ask the FBI now for the whole file. Do you think he has?
I think he has, and I think that we will likely know more sooner rather than later.
I hope, and we will find out probably first from Selena Zito, who is President Trump's favorite journalist. Selena, thank you for spending an extra segment with me. Zito, Selena is her X account, but the book is Butler. Go and get Butler. It's back on the New York Times bestseller list as their kids are back in school. God bless them all and keep them safe. And if you've got time on your hand, Butler is the best book about the last year in America. I'm brought to you today by AndrewandTodd.com. Great lenders, people who work with Sierra Pacific Mortgage, people who will get you into a house if you're moving across the country. Do remember their names, AndrewandTodd.com, AndrewandTodd.com, 888-888-1172. I talked to Andrew this morning for about an hour because he's in my men's group. And Andrew is as wonderful a human being as you'll ever deal with. Todd is just right up there with him. and they will never steer you wrong. They will never upsell you. They will never let you borrow too much money. They will get you the best rate possible. I especially want to emphasize for senior citizens who are 62 years and older, if you have equity in your home that you would like to tap into via reverse mortgage, please call Andrew or Todd. 888-888-1172. 888-888-1172. Tell them you were listening to Hugh Hewitt. Thousands of people have done their loans, whether first-time home buyer or a veteran who's using a VA, or a senior doing a reverse mortgage, or someone wanting a home equity line of credit, or somebody wanting to refinance. Refinances have soared to almost half of the market right now. Do it with andrewandtodd.com. Now, I want to begin with this dire news from Minneapolis. Not much has changed since the beginning of the show. Here is Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara speaking about the incident, cut 15.
Young children, ages 8 and 10, were killed where they sat in the pews. Their parents have been notified. 17 other people were injured, 14 of them being children. 2 of those children are in critical condition. The coward who fired these shots ultimately took his own life in the rear of the church. Our hearts are broken for the families who have lost their children, for these young lives that are now fighting to recover, and for our entire community that has been so deeply traumatized by this senseless attack.
Eternal peace grant unto them, O Lord, and may perpetual light shine upon them. May they rest in peace. Amen. That's a Catholic response. I don't know if Jacob Frey, the mayor of Minneapolis, is Catholic. He sort of mocked prayer after this tragedy, cut number 9.
There are no words that can capture the horror and the evil of this unspeakable act. Children are dead. There are families that have a deceased child. You cannot put into words the gravity, the tragedy, or the absolute pain of this situation. We are a Minneapolis family. But to everybody out there, do not think of these as just somebody else's kids. Those families are suffering immense pain right now. Think of this as if it were your own. Every one of us needs to be wrapping our arms around these families, giving them every ounce that we can muster. These were Minneapolis families. These were American families. And the amount of pain that they are suffering right now is extraordinary. And don't just say this is about thoughts and prayers right now. These kids were literally praying. It was the first week of school. They were in a church. These are kids that should be learning with their friends. They should be playing on the playground. They should be able to go to school or church in peace without the fear or risk of violence, and their parents should have the same kind of assurance. These are the sort of basic assurances that every family should have, every step of the day, regardless of where they are in our country.
I'm not sure what he's trying to do except fill time. I thought it was a gratuitous slap at prayer. They might be in Minneapolis, but they are part of individual families that are grieving, and they are part of a Catholic community which is international, and they share in common first week of Masses with anyone who's ever gone to Catholic school, and last week of Masses, which is also a tradition in Catholic school. And indeed, way back long ago when I was a first grade through 12th grade weekly Mass, nuns with clickers, and I can still do the Stations of the Cross. I can probably still serve them, because in repetition is learning, and in learning there is the beginning of wisdom and the beginning of faith. I'm not sure what Mr. Fry believes, if anything, but I don't believe you ought to be denigrating prayer and in any way suggesting it is inappropriate at this time, because it isn't inappropriate at this time. the peace that surpasses all understanding is what Pope Leo was trying to communicate when he sent a telegram to the Bishop of Minneapolis. And a GoFundMe would actually be more helpful than a rant of that sort. Now, I would like President Trump to instruct the FBI to please put together, there are roughly, I've posted something over at my X account. The Washington Post overcounts school shootings. It includes like one shot fired during a drug deal gone bad in school shootings, and that therefore overcounts the problem. But the problem is immense. Since Columbine, I believe there have been, well, let me read it to you, approximately 118 active shooter incidents at K through 12 schools since 1999. That's according to the Navy Postgraduate School Center for Homeland Defense and Security. 118 active shooters since 1999. So that's 26 years, and it's 118 incidents. You do the math, it's 4 to 5 a year. Okay, so 4 or 5 times a year, a shooting at a school. Now, this occurs in the Annunciation Church, which is adjacent to the Annunciation School. And if it's like my Catholic school growing up, they're attached. And so you can say school and not be dismissive of the church. You can say church and not be dismissive of the school. There were other worshipers there, but I would bet anything it's a pretty much 99% church and school affiliated congregation that morning. There might be some wanderers by, daily mass attenders, etc. But 118 times. And I would ask, if I were the president, I would ask the FBI, please do a deep dive down at Quantico, where the FBI Academy is, and identify what it is we want to look for, and let's profile. Let's profile. We need to profile. I need to remind you that Americans for a Balanced Budget is a sponsor of this program. Their website is stophealthcosthikes.com. Stophealthcosthikes.com. What are they trying to do? They're trying to get Congress to extend health tax credits for health insurance. So if you are obliged by Obamacare, a terrible law, a broken law, one that broke American health care in many ways, it forced millions of Americans into the state exchanges to buy their health care. They're not eligible for Medicaid because they make money, and they're not old enough to be on Medicare, and they don't have an employer that provides them with insurance, and they're not a member of the retired military so that they have TRICARE. They're not in the VA system. They got to go to the individual exchanges. You can go naked, you can go uninsured, but if you want insurance of any sort, you got to go to the state-run Obamacare insurance exchanges. Very expensive stuff. And until this year, people got tax credits. They get them this year, in fact, if they're obliged to use those, but they were not included in the one big, beautiful bill. Not sure why, but I do believe in tax relief for people who got screwed by Obamacare. And if you do, and if you're in the individual exchanges, the state-run exchanges, you're buying your own health care, head over to stophealthcosthikes.com, because your tax credit ended with the one big beautiful bill at the end of this year. You'll get it in 2025. You won't get it in 2026 unless Congress acts. Stophealthcosthikes.com. Abe Greenwald joins me. He is the executive editor of Commentary Magazine and a nearly always present participant in the Commentary Pod. He was there today when they discussed the big news of Taylor Swift getting engaged to the football player whose name I can never quite remember. Abe, do you hope that she has children? Because last night we were talking about this at dinner with guests, and they said they hope that she had 4, 5, 6 kids because the Swifties will all follow suit. What do you think?
Well, sure, if she wants. I mean, I hope that every married couple has kids if they're able to. I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing for the country. It's a good thing for the family, and it's wonderful to promote family life generally. And to promote the idea of the family. But I don't have a particular interest, I must admit, in Taylor Swift or Travis Kelce at all.
Travis Kelce, thank you. You have more interest. I listened to it and I was amused by Matt Continetti and John Podhoretz having at their fingertips pretty much every celebrity marriage ever. And John's categorization of Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward as being the one where the equals endured. But pop culture is not my thing. I want to talk to you about the tragedy in Minneapolis today, Abe. I was going to talk to you about your newsletter, Masks in Manhattan, but I want to ask you about this. According to the Naval Postgraduate School Center for Homeland Defense and Security, there have been 118 active shooter incidents in schools since 1999. That's 4 to 5 a year. Do you think have you seen, I'll put it in the personal, have you ever seen a decent study of anything that demonstrates pattern recognition among these 118 shooters?
I have not. I mean, early on, if you go back to Columbine, which was the sort of signal tragedy in this category, there was a lot of talk about these are, outsiders, kids who are shunned, that kind of thing. But I think we've moved so far beyond that. And there is this issue now because we have more than one or two examples of trans shooters. And a lot of people don't want to touch it. They don't want to talk about it. But that is not good. Well, it's not good law enforcement because if you want to recognize a pattern, if you want to study crime in order to fight crime, you need to get a hold of the facts. And I think it's past time that we do that.
Yeah, you take Sandy Hook and Uvalde and Parkland and now Annunciation. There are others that are close, like the Nashville Christian School and the Arizona shooting that killed the judge and Gabby Giffords. That they're adjacent to a school shooting. There's got to be patterns, and I don't think it is trans, although it might be doses of medication. I really don't know, but I can't believe it isn't studied. Isn't it studied by someone?
Well, I'm sure it is studied by someone, but I'm not suggesting that it's only trans. I'm talking about that as a sort of subcategory that seems to have established itself. Look, it should be studied, and we're also in the midst of a well-documented mental health crisis among the younger cohort. Huge levels of depression, unprecedented levels of anxiety. And this is in combination with a culture that preaches to the young and teaches victimhood, catastrophe, the evils of the country and of establishment figures and establishment thinking. So there is some kind of medical, mental health, cultural, political cocktail, I think, at work here.
Trey Gowdy was on with me earlier, and he'll be back on a little bit later. He's got a new book out, The Color of Death. It's his first murder mystery. He was a prosecutor for many, many years, and it's a dark work. You don't really want to be a prosecutor unless you're really mentally stable, and he talks about that in his book, which is also very good. Are you a murder mystery fan, Abe? I'm not.
I'm not much of one. I have read a few in my time, but it's not my thing. I'm not much of a genre guy.
Yeah, neither am I, but this turned out to be very, very good, The Color of Death. But what I liked about it is it went into the prosecutorial method and the actual forensic work that is routine in a homicide, and I found it very interesting. And I asked him what was his opinion. He said, young men, overwhelmingly young men, who have lost contact with a social circle and are isolated. That is the generally obvious connector between these 118 incidents. And I'm persuaded by that. It is almost always young men. Some of them might be transitioning, but not a majority certainly. But they're all young men between like 16 and 25. Not all. The guy in Vegas, who we don't know anything about, that to me is more interesting than the Kennedy assassination. But something's in the water. And it's not guns. It's not guns.
No, the guns were always there. I think, and look, this all started before COVID. Now you add the antisocial habits that were institutionalized by the pandemic and by the lockdowns and by the school closures. Now you're talking about a generation of males and females who are more socially isolated than they've ever been, maybe than any previous American generation ever. So we've in some sense, turbocharged this problem of social isolation.
Your newsletter this morning is about the return of masks in noticeable numbers on the streets of Manhattan. I have noticed it in airports. Now, there is a pretty good kick of COVID going around, but it's not lethal this time. It's been watered down after 5 years. What does a mask signal to you in an ordinary suburban setting, much less Manhattan, Abe?
Well, I can't help but see it as irrational. And I don't base this on the studies because, as I say in the letter, studies, as in so many areas of science and health and medicine now, they are so contradictory, so competing. Each one is waged as a weapon in some sort of camp in the cultural war. But the simple fact remains that everyone ended up getting COVID anyway. The masked, the unmasked, and most people I know were masked, at least at some point, if not for a good majority of the height of the pandemic. Everyone got it. Nothing stopped it. None of the guidance, including masks, stopped it. So I see it as a kind of talisman that people cling to irrationally.
You know what, Abe, I want you to consider, I think it's a political statement 9 out of 10 times. Some people might have fear about their health, but I think people are making political statements by this.
Well, there's a lot of that. And the mask, it's a sort of fascinating evolution of the mask since 2020 because, of course, it's also now completely adopted by pro-Hamas protesters.
Correct.
All the other left-wing protests, they all wear masks now, too, because it's been deemed a social good to wear masks in public. So that is part of it. It is in some sense an actual tribal mask, yes.
And so I'm fascinated by your newsletter, and I love people. By the way, if you go to commentary.org and you sign up for commentary, which you ought to do, you'll get Abe's newsletter every morning. And I don't even think you have to be a subscriber, but you should be at least a follower who likes it over at YouTube. You ought to listen to and watch the Commentary Podcast, the most indispensable podcast out there. Along with Ruthless, I get my high thinking from Commentary. I get my politics on the inside and the sharp elbows from Ruthless. Abe Greenwald, thank you. Sarah C. Bedford is the chief political investigative reporter for the Washington Examiner, where you can follow her on X at Sarah C. Bedford. Sarah, there's nobody in town. It's the last week in August. We have a tragedy in Minneapolis, but what are you working on with nobody there?
Well, we're starting to look ahead to what Congress will be doing when they do finally get back to work next week after Labor Day. And, my colleague Byron York has been doing some good work. The political team has as well. It's just this awful wilderness that Democrats find themselves in. I mean, the reaction to the Minneapolis shooting sort of underscores their inability to handle any crisis, big or small, with anything approaching something that normal people can get behind. I mean, it just keeps getting worse and worse for them as they take Trump's bait at every turn. So we've been doing a lot of work on them, especially as they have their DNC meeting in Minnesota this week. We
were having great fun until today, mocking the DNC, but now it's too tragic to mock them. Jacob Fry, their mayor, was inarticulate, sort of word salad talking points, but he managed to slam prayer, which is not exactly an appropriate response. Do you think the Senate will go through with the rules change on nominees?
Well, they're going to have to do something. The frustration is really growing among Republicans from the White House. There was hope that some sort of consent deal could have been reached before the recess to clear a few dozen nominees. That didn't end up happening, and with the appropriations deadline looming, they'll have just a month by the time they get back to do something on spending. Nominees will be totally on the back burner, so something has to be done to get those pushed through. It's certainly a possibility.
Well, that would be the nuclear option, and that once, of course, the nuclear option's been used with regards to nominations twice. A third time would not be surprising. But they're not going to go nuclear on legislation, do you suspect?
No, I don't think that there are supporters for that. Everyone is still operating under the assumption that to pass a budget, you're going to need the 60 votes, so you're going to need some cooperation from Democrats. I don't think anyone's operating under the assumption that they'll nuke the filibuster in any sort of meaningful way.
I would love to see a vote on it because right now I would like to see if Democrats voted to end the filibuster and hold the Republicans back and get 47 votes up there for doing away with the filibuster, or 45, and then, maybe change the rule and then run with it. Expand the court, ram through 5 nominees. We're not going to do that, but do you think Thune would embrace the politics of that?
That doesn't seem to be the vibe that Thune has. I mean, he's not as much of an institutionalist as someone like McConnell was, or how Cornyn might have governed as a leader. But I do think Republicans recognize how dangerous that could be with with Democrats wanting to do stuff like you just mentioned, packing the court and make some really sweeping changes to the structure of American government. In some ways, Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin were the kids with their fingers in the dam for all those years the Democrats were in control.
All I see is the benefit of I think the Democrats would vote against changing the filibuster rule right now because the Republicans have the majority and are likely to keep it for at least another year. And therefore, I would just like to have it on the record. The hypocrisy in their caucus is so immense. Last question. Abigail Spanberger announced today she is going to rescind Governor Youngkin's February executive order obliging Virginia law enforcement to help carry out immigration crackdowns. Do you think that's good politics, even in Northern Virginia, which is light blue?
No, that baffled me. And the way that she has handled the transgender school policy controversies that have been going on in Loudoun County, Arlington County, and Fairfax County over the past few weeks. I mean, for her to sort of fall into the same traps that we saw Terry McAuliffe fall into and other Democrats on some of the most contentious and bipartisan issues in her portfolio, it's kind of baffling to me. It's almost like she wants this race to be closer, because that is certainly where she's going with that.
Yeah, I'm a Virginian. I was always going to vote for Winsome Sears, and I know she's behind, but Spanberger is doing everything to recreate the conditions of 4 years ago when Youngkin upset McAuliffe, because people want law enforcement. They don't want boys and girls locker rooms or girls sports, and they want illegals identified and processed correctly. I mean, I think these are 80-20 issues.
They certainly are, especially the illegal immigration one.
And even in Northern Virginia, even in deep blue, very, very wealthy Northern Virginia, these are at best 70-30 issues. Sarah C. Bedford, enjoy your last couple of days of August. We'll talk to you when Congress is back next week. In both the first and the second hour, Trey Gowdy was with me. I, of course, taped the interview at the start of the show. The Color of Death is his brand new book, is co-authored by Christopher Grayson. It's going to be a fabulous bestseller because a lot of people love murder mysteries. Not typically my thing, but Trey got me with The Color of Death. Trey, is there a predicate for Sheriff Lloyd Fuller, who's not the world's most inviting character?
No, he was conjured up in my mind. It was probably my sarcasm, Hugh, which I think you and I share that gift. You don't have to really even be a police officer to win the sheriff's race. It's not a contest of who the best cop is. It's a name ID. I got along great with all my sheriffs. Obviously, the prosecutor in this book does not get along well with this sheriff. But tension between so prosecutors can survive with 2 of 3 constituencies, but if you lose 2 of 3, you won't survive. Law enforcement, victims, and the media. You can survive with just 2 out of the 3, but clearly this prosecutor does not have a great relationship with the sheriff. That was made up. I did with all of my sheriffs.
Now, how about judges? I've been in front of a few judges on federal environmental law and a whole bunch of administrative types. But the second judge, not the first judge, He is relentlessly demanding of both sides of the courtroom. He's an equal opportunity abuser of both prosecutors and defense attorneys who do not meet his expectations. He does not tolerate shortcuts, discovery games, or courtroom shenanigans. He charged his own courtroom bailiff with contempt for falling asleep in court and had a deputy who was a witness led out of the courtroom in handcuffs when the deputy refused to follow his instructions on what he could or could not testify to. Is that a real judge?
I clerked for him. Yes. For 2 years, and named my daughter after him because he found out that I donated to a Republican candidate for Senate. He called me into his chambers and yelled at me for an hour because he was friends with Fritz Holland. So I had to write a check to Fritz Holland just to get out of being.
Get right with the judge? Oh my gosh, that's funny.
And then named my daughter after him. Her middle name is Anderson, after Ross Anderson, the federal judge.
Well, that is a fine testament to Ross Anderson. Cindy, the DA, who is Southern born and bred, overcomes more injustice and inequity in a month than any DA I've known. That's a nice compliment. But this is kind of startling, Trey Gowdy. Courthouses are similar to hospitals and clinics and counseling sessions in one respect. Broken people come here to be healed, but there is no healing. Everyone leaves with some type of scar. And then closure may be the greatest lie ever told. There is no closure. Boy, you are being very, very blunt, aren't you?
I am being blunt, and the truth is we saw that, today. There will be no closure, even for the children who survived. They will either have survivor regret, which is real from a psychiatric, psychological standpoint. They'll have guilt. The parents will never get over the loss of a child. I don't care how many children you have. So that again came from a real life experience. I'll spare your listeners the details because they're horrific, but it was a sexual assault case. And I remember arguing to the jury that there are scars on both sides. You can see the scar on the little girl, but there are scars on both sides, and it's up to you, the jury, to figure out what the appropriate punishment is.
And are there bows and butchers in every community? I know this is set up in Gowinsville between Spartanburg and Greenville, but are there bows and butchers everywhere?
I think there are businessmen who like to influence law enforcement. I have seen business leaders that think that their wealth and their status, that a different set of rules apply to them. And it's up. Again, I remember a judge. He went on to become a federal judge. Someone donated to his campaign and then came into his office and said, I need you to get me out of this speeding ticket. And this judge, whom I have tremendous respect for, said, okay, tell me the amount. $217. He got out his checkbook and wrote a check for $217 and said, I'll pay it for you. Don't ever come in my office and ask me to get you out of something. I will not do it. I'll pay the fine, but I will not get you out of it.
Good for
him.
That's rare.
That
is rare.
Yeah, he's a wonderful, wonderful man.
There is also a character, Shauna, and I'm not going to talk much about Shauna, other than to say she talks to the police detective and the prosecutor when they show up, and the prosecutor is unannounced. I've told law students for 30 years, never talk to the police or prosecutor until you have your lawyer with you. Ever, never, don't do it. They're good people. They're doing their job. It doesn't do you any good, ever. Do you share my advice?
I do, but I am so thankful that most bad people don't. Because if it weren't for confessions, our conviction rate would be much, much lower. You mentioned solving it within 48 hours. That's because the person who committed the crime confesses, and they confess without their lawyer present. So if people followed your advice, our conviction rate would be much lower.
Well, that is the secret sauce in Ludwig, a new show that we're watching in the Hewitt household, and it's every murder mystery. There's usually a confession because it does wrap up a plot pretty quickly. I don't see a confession coming here. I don't know how it ends. Again, I saved the last 25 pages for tonight, but you're going to drive a lot of people away from the practice of prosecution, don't you think, Trey Gowdy?
You know what? I tell them that it will be the most rewarding job you ever have, but you will never unsee what you have seen. And you need to know that. Your advice to your law students is exactly right. You will pay a price for being a prosecutor. It's just a question of whether you're willing to pay it or not.
1 minute left in this segment. Are the shoe prints in the tire track, are those real deals? Do they still work?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. But where they really work is when you're sitting with a suspect and you tell them you have them, even if you don't. That's what gets them to confess, is when you say, look, the prints match something we found in your house. We got your tire tracks. But sometimes that's all you have to go on. So you have to play the cards you're dealt. If defendants did not talk, you put your finger on it, the solve rate would go way down.
Oh, okay. We don't want to give too many people too many ideas. Don't go anywhere, America. I'm bringing Trey Gowdy back to conclude the show. Great book, The Color of Death. The Color of Death. You have time for one more summer read. It's a 4-day read at most. It's you'll just get drawn in and you'll love it. But when I come back, I want to find out from Trey Gowdy if there are going to be more in this series, because I think they're probably going to be. It's a very sad day, of course, with the shootings in Minneapolis. More will come out overnight. I will cover it in detail tomorrow. I've been talking all 3 hours with Trey Gowdy, who you can see every Sunday night on Fox News. He's got this brand new book, The Color of Death, out with co-author Christopher Grayson. It's really gripping. Trey, do you intend that there will be more in this series? I don't know if Colm lives, so I'm really on tenterhooks here. So I don't know if there can even the possibility of more. But are you going to stay in the crime fiction business?
You know what? I tell my wife all the time, Hugh, the last party that I went to where I wasn't invited, I did not have a good time. So if there's a demand, if people like it, yes, I have the next 2 books actually outlined in my mind. I actually have them already written. My publisher and my editor said, look, you have way too much in this book. You don't have to create more. You got to call some out. I have the next 2 books already in my head mapped out. But
well, I hope Bones is back, and I'm not going to tell anyone about Bones, but I like him a lot. Everyone should have a friend like Bones for reasons that will become obvious.
Bones is a real person. He's a real amalgamation of 3 of the homicide detectives that I work the most with.
And just to conclude, Trey, the youngster, the new detective. Everyone's got to be a new detective to become Bones, right? Does every prosecutor, are they aware of that? Is every ancient detective aware that every new prosecutor's got to do it a few times before they get the hang of it?
They are. The question is whether you can recover from your mistakes and whether you learn from them. So I think I put in the book, and you have taught me to call the name of the book, The Color of Death. The question is not whether or not you make a mistake. It's whether or not you make the same one over again. So whenever I would bring a police officer in and say, look, I have to plead this down or I have to dismiss it, I need you to know why so we don't ever have this conversation again.
Well, that happens a lot. There's a lot of teaching going on here. Very last question. A lot of grief, a lot of tragedy in this book beyond the murder. In the backstory, why?
It is the deepest cut of all, Hugh, to lose a child. And so some people that manifests itself in different ways. I wanted Colm Truesdale to be committing a long form of suicide. He didn't take the easy way out. He didn't just take his life. It's a long way. It's my way of saying there's a difference between taking your life and losing the will to live. He just doesn't have the will to live anymore. And something's going to have to happen to reignite that desire for life, which is the greatest gift of all. And, not to spoil it, but my wife wanted there to be light. So let there be light.
There is light, and good things, including avocados, show up throughout The Color of Death because of the unexpected acts and kindness, whether it's a $100 tip in a diner or a waitress that works overtime. Trey Gowdy, congratulations on The Color of Death, and to Christopher Grayson as well. I think The Color of Death is going to do very well because people do need to read, and they love a good mystery, and Trey Gowdy's giving you a good yarn. Thank you, Congressman.